All this week, I couldn't help but remember and think about the last time I had the chance to preach about this parable, the parable of the prodigal son. And remembering so clearly that in our 3-year cycle, we have a 3-year cycle of readings, and so 3 years ago when this came up was my first time to come and meet you. 3 years ago on this Sunday is when my family and I came to be with you to explore together, does the Holy Spirit have something in mind for us? Does the Holy Spirit intend for my family and I to come and serve in the midst of you? And does the Holy Spirit intend for our future together, the mission and ministry that's been entrusted to us? Does the Holy Spirit have a piece of that that it intends for me to help shepherd? And so the answer was yes. Thanks be to God. And so this was the Sunday 3 years ago when I came and preached. And I remember so clearly as the call committee and I, as we were looking for the Sunday that I would come and preach, and this one worked out, and I went home and started looking at the texts, and I remember so clearly reading that this would be the gospel and thinking to myself, yes, I get to preach about a lunatic father. Because did you notice what this dad did in this parable that Jesus says? This guy is out of his mind. I mean, it starts off, and it's clearly that Jesus' attention is on the dad. He starts off the parable by saying, there was a man who had 2 sons. And then immediately it takes this really weird turn because the younger boy comes to him and says, Dad, you're no good to me alive. Give me now what I will inherit when you're gone. Give me my inheritance now because you're no good to me alive. Now, reading commentaries about this parable, Kenneth Bailey has a wonderful study of this that he uses the lens of sort of Middle Eastern peasant culture as well as Jewish writing, and he says, this does not happen. This is beyond the pale. This is not supposed to be this way. And if it does, then that boy is shamed and punished. And the older brother, it was his responsibility to step in and very loudly complain and put a stop to the whole thing. And he says nothing. So older son doesn't think much of dad either. And then this lunatic dad goes ahead and does it. Divides all his property and gives it to the both boys. And again, the older son says nothing. I don't know what he's thinking, this crazy father. And then Jesus says a couple days later, because it took a couple days for the son to sell off livestock, sell the property, sell the land that he's just inherited. And then, now that it is money and cash, off he goes, dwindling down that road into the distance. And I was thinking, I really cannot imagine what that would be like for this dad. My boys are too young. That sense of having them go and watching my heart walk away from me, because this was before the days of Instabook and Faceagram and constant texting, emails, phone calls, postcards, letters, none of that. Right? None of that. And so as the father watches that son dwindle into the distance, that is it. As far as he knows, that split is forever. His son has walked away from him forever. And he could be dead at any moment, and dad would never know. He could be dead any day, and the father might never know. From that point on, as far as the father knows, that son is gone forever. And I can't imagine what that would be like as a parent, to have your heart hollowed out that way because a really big chunk of who you are and where your heart is and who your heart is has just walked away. And for all you know, is never coming back. So maybe it's not so hard to imagine that as time passes and the father looking down that road sees a familiar figure, a figure that he would recognize forever and no matter what. When that figure comes shambling down the road toward him, maybe we shouldn't be so surprised that he will not wait. He can't wait. And he hikes up his robes, and his, hairy ankles are flashing, and his sandals flopping, and he's racing down the road because he cannot wait. He's a father first. He's a father before he's a landowner. He's a father before he's a businessman. He's a father before all else, and that's his boy. Come back. This boy that was gone forever. My son was dead, and now he's alive. How can I wait? And he comes crashing in to his younger son's scheme. It's not clear. It's not clear if the younger son was ever sorry. He just got hungry. And he says, wait a second, back home, my dad's servants eat better than this. Maybe I'll go back. And he has a scheme. He's got a whole plan and a plot to save faith so that he doesn't have to accept grace. But dad will have none of that. He comes crashing in to the son's plan, interrupts him in what he's trying to say. My boy is alive. I can't do anything but throw a party. Now, in Jesus' day, if you wanted to have a party, you had to kill some animals. No refrigerators, no freezers, no Costco or Aldi or anything like that. So what you were going to serve had to be killed and had to be fresh. So if it was going to be a family, you go for something small, a lamb, something like that. If you're going to have a few more folks, you might kill and serve a goat, like the older brother asks for. And he says, I would have loved to have a goat for me and my cronies. But no, not this dad. I mean, this is a family affair, right? My boy is back. My son is back. The family is complete. And this father doesn't go for the lamb, and he doesn't go for the goat. He goes for this fatted calf. And that is a huge amount of food. And what this means is the dad plans to invite everybody. The whole village. Everybody that he can get the word out to. He wants to have everybody there. And that's been bothering me all week. What is he doing inviting all those rotten people? Because these are the folks that for all the time that son was gone were whispering behind his back. These are the folks who were gossiping. Did you hear what happened over at that house? These are the folks, the sort of know-it-alls that have been talking about, oh, I would never raise my kids that way. These are the folks that have been whispering behind his back and maybe in front of his back about what that old younger son is off doing. These are the folks that have been making him miserable, and he invites them? What kind of guest list is this? What is this lunatic father doing? But then we remember who's telling the story, right? Because Jesus is the one who keeps sitting at the wrong table. Every time we've got the table set for supper, and we've got the plates all set out, and everything is all nice, and this lovely little spot for Jesus, and we've made it look all fancy because it's a really special deal because Jesus is here. Every time, everything is just right for the family. Jesus keeps going to that other table, the one over in the corner, where folks have teeth that maybe don't match, and a skin color that makes us a little uncomfortable, and an accent that makes it a little hard to hear them, and whose immigration status is just a little dodgy. Jesus keeps going to that table. And just as we've got everything set and just enough places, Jesus keeps sneaking out into the dark and inviting tax collectors and hookers and wild-eyed, crazy-haired homeless folks and bringing them to supper and then setting out tables and places for them. Just when we've got everything all carefully set up with just enough spots for the folks who belong and the folks who are supposed to be there, Jesus keeps bringing more plates. No, Jesus, we're okay, we got it. And Jesus keeps bringing more. Because you see, what this lunatic father knew is that when one sheep is missing, the other 99 are incomplete. When one member of the family is missing, the whole family suffers. When one of us is not here in the community, in the family where we belong, when one soul is lost, everybody suffers. And this, by the way, is why, as Christians, our heart impels us out into the world to do things like host men's shelters or to be a voice for justice. It's not out of the goodness of our hearts. And it's not for some altruistic reason. It's for a purely selfish impulse that we want to know the joy of God. And God has said when one lost soul is found, He throws a party in heaven, a party to end all parties. And so we go out to serve and heal and help and seek the lost because we want to know that joy of God, the celebration in heaven when just one comes home. We go out to be God's hands and God's voice because when one is missing, we all suffer. When anyone suffers, none of us are free. And we go out to heal and save and be that voice and hands of God because sometimes we're the lost ones too. Sometimes we're the ones who need to be found. And sometimes we are one of the kids of a lunatic father. And so at the end of the story, Jesus leaves us with one of the sons standing out in the dark. He's come and heard the celebration and found out that it's for that rotten, no-good brother of his. And the father has come out to invite him and to remind him that mind-boggling assertion, son, you are always with me. Everything I have is yours. It was interesting. This week, it finally occurred to me that the father might not have been talking about stuff, but about relationships. Son, everything I have is yours. And maybe he meant family. And so when the son was missing, that was you too. And it was interesting to me how long it took me to have that idea. It tells me something about how I'm reading the Bible, that I assumed stuff. But the father who comes out with this amazing assertion goes back inside, and Jesus leaves us with that other boy standing out in the dark, listening to the sound of joy. And he doesn't tell us what happens. And so we never know. Does he ever manage to forgive his father for loving too much? Does he ever forgive his dad for being so recklessly abundant with wondrous love? Does he ever forgive his father for loving the unlovable and not being angry at the one who broke his heart? Does he ever manage to forgive his father for loving unlovable people?